Good evening, friends. Thank you, Shuchi, for nice words. And it's nice seeing you growing. Dr. Jingan was mentioning. So I'm at the back of Dr. Jingan. And thank you, organizers. I'm seeing all my good friends, Dr. Ramchandani, Shuchi, Dr. Manisha, Dr. Jali, Archana Didi. Where is Archana? So all good friends are there, and we are फिर सब लोग मिलकर के सत्संग कर रहे हैं. Something like this. It's sort of this thing is happening to us. And thanks, Bansi, to push forward juvenile and young diabetes in the country. Because I think Manisha must have mentioned that I remember 20 years back there had hardly been any sessions. And Dr. Jingan would remember any sessions in our diabetes meetings. They used to give one talk or two talk, and I think we have started pushing forward things for last. It is the hard work of 20, 30 years that we are seeing the fruits. But good, before I close my eyes, I have seen the fruits. So this is the wonderful thing that has happened to me. So many sessions, so many people are interested in type 1 diabetes. So I will live happily and I will leave happily. So both ways, I'm a happy man at the moment. Thank you for allocating me the topic pertaining to my specialty, because endocrine things I looked at, it's really interesting. And what am I going to talk is thyroid disorders, which are very common, celiac disease, Addison's, polycystic ovarian disease in type 1. I think I will have a word. Erectile dysfunction in type 1, we seldom talk about it because most of the time we encounter with younger patients. Hypogonadism and hypothalamus. So this is lastly low body weight, they have amenorrhea, and it is like a central hypogonadism. Second thing that I have noted, I think maybe I'll share when I discuss the polycystic part. First, coming to the thyroid, type 1 and thyroid both are autoimmune disorders, so share a common connection. Up to 17 to 30% of time, autoimmune thyroid disease occurs in up to 17 to 30%. And the risk of hypothyroidism in any type 1 diabetes is around 25%. Both hyper and hypo are more commonly associated. So I think there was a word I was speaking on type 2. So type 2 is also associated and type 1 is also associated. Poor diabetes control predisposes. So again, the role of control comes. There are some studies. Coming to thyroid antibodies, thyroid peroxidase antibodies are present up to 25% as compared to 10%. So 2.5 times more common, and 5 to 50% in different studies convert into autoimmune thyroiditis. So that is another important thing. In larger part of these patients will develop hypothyroidism, but a subset of them also develop hyperthyroidism. So always keep in your mind the hyperthyroid, the thyrotoxicosis also. Duration of diabetes may be a risk factor for type 1, but not type 2. What are the factors? This is not specific, but these are general factors responsible for thyroid, hereditary, increasing age, puberty, female gender, estrogen use, pregnancy, and association of any other endocrine disorders, which of which type 1 is one of them. Management part, the hyperthyroidism, I would like to put a word. The standard management like antithyroid drugs, radioactive iodine, or surgery. But for subclinical thyrotoxicosis, and if the patients are on the, suppose patient has had 20 years, 30 years, 35, 40 years of diabetes, then they are more prone for coronary events, and there we should initiate therapy even in subclinical thyrotoxicosis. So that is important. Hypothyroidism, standard treatment is to start thyroxine when TSH is more than 10. Important thing is whenever we start treatment, it improves lipid profile and reduces insulin resistance. So even if lipid profile is abnormal and some amount of hypothyroidism is there, first treat hypothyroidism and then to initiate the anti initiate the statins. Role of thyroid scan, actually nuclear scan is very important. This is all autoimmune disorder, so even if the picture will mimic like thyrotoxicosis, if you do a scan, the uptake will be very low. So it may be simple thyroiditis and we need not do anything. If time permits, I think we will discuss. In case of ketoacidosis in type 1 diabetes, thyroid function should be considered even with little suspicion. Use of statin should be considered after making patient euthyroid. So that is another important thing. Another important entity is the celiac disease. I think it has been highlighted. So let us see what this is. It is seen as 12 to 25%. So this is a huge chunk that patient has. It has a significant impact on growth, bone density, and glycemic control. So all aspects of growth are associated. And the non-specific features frequently result in delay and misdiagnosis. So many times they are minimal symptomatic or asymptomatic. We have some work on celiac disease, and we published our paper in Indian Pediatrics, and it was dominantly done by my younger colleague, Dr. Anurag Vajpayee. The celiac disease in Indian children and adolescents with type 1 diabetes. And what we did, it was a retrospective analysis of 208 type 1 diabetes children, and we did TTG, tissue transglutaminase IgA levels within 6 months of diagnosis and annually for follow-up. 14 subjects, first time when we did 14 subjects were negative. And when they were followed, and we did it 6 monthly, mean duration of follow-up was 3.9 years. Then 14 new subjects we detected out of 208. So this is interesting thing. And we tried to calculate the prevalence. It was approximately 25%. It was huge. Coming to the Addison's disease, patient with type 1 diabetes and patients with Addison disease need lifelong replacement therapy with insulin and glucocorticoids, respectively. Patients with concurrent type 1 diabetes and Addison disease comprise a treatment challenge due to counterbalancing effects. And in patients, this is again a very important thing. In patient with diabetes, glycated hemoglobin is a very strong marker that shows a good control, but somehow we are lacking any type of such marker if we are dealing with Addison's disease. What are the issues? The incidence among patients with type 1 diabetes is 193 per million patient years. The risk of developing Addison disease is in patients with type 1 diabetes was around 10 times higher than general population. So the risk is very, very high. So we need to have a strong suspicion. Patients with concurrent type 1 diabetes and Addison disease has 4.3 times higher risk of death. So more chances, 10 times, death chances also 4 times than patients with type 1 diabetes alone. And mind you, type 1 diabetes or any type of diabetes are more chances of death compared to non-diabetics. Up to 60% of patients with autoimmune Addison disease have additional autoimmune condition, maybe thyroid, type 1 diabetes, or some gonadal dysfunctions. So insulin versus control, because of these counterbalancing effects on glucose metabolism, patients, I think let us, both type 1 and Addison disease is a complicated condition due to counterbalancing effects of insulin and cortisol. Because if you give glucocorticoid, blood sugar goes up. And if you give insulin, the blood sugar goes down. The management of both diagnosis during an infection or other stressful event is challenging in order to prevent adrenal crisis and manage hypoglycemia or ketosis. Because of these counterbalancing effects on glucose metabolism, patients with type 1 diabetes present with reduced insulin requirement when they develop severe glucocorticoid deficiency. So another important thing is whenever in practice also we do, whenever there is hypoglycemia or the insulin requirement is going down, we think on these lines. What are the indicators of patients of Addison's disease in patients with type 1 diabetes? There is a frequent hospitalization. So A1C is 1, anemia is 2, and this is the third. Multiple diabetic complications. And this is a new thing. If diabetic retinopathy is coming frequently, look for adrenal once. prescription of thyroid, if there is any association of any type of thyroid disorders, one has to look. Patient is requiring glucagon. Dr. Sujata very nicely mentioned about glucagon. Patient requiring glucagon or recurrent hypoglycemia, one has to give a thought. Diagnosis: cortisol more than 500 anytime excludes, and less than 140 suggests cortisol deficiency. And we also do a stimulation test with synaptin. There is a actin prolongatum, long synaptin, short synaptin. So there are different tests. If you're interested, you can discuss. This is another interesting fact. Time of addition diagnosis in patients with or without diabetes. So this is with type 1 and this is without. If you compare to normal population, they develop Addison disease much, much earlier. Polycystic ovarian disease used to be considered as a topic of type 2 diabetes, hyperinsulinemia, gestational diabetes, but the picture is sometimes different. PCOS is the most common endocrine disorder in women. The prevalence is variable from 16 to 15%. Insulin resistance and compensatory endogenous hyperinsulinemia in close association with obesity. Type 1 diabetes needed supraphysiological doses of subcutaneous insulin. So this also causes hyperinsulinemia. So exogenous hyperinsulinemia could then contribute to androgen excess and predispose women, leading to polycystic ovarian disease, as happens to insulin resistance. So again, this is the theory. And I looked at the paper, type 1 diabetes and a polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is a meta-analysis and it is interesting. And what it did, the pooled prevalence of polycystic ovarian disease with type 1 diabetes is 24%. It's huge. And studies especially reporting the prevalence according to different definitions of syndrome. Prevalence of androgen excess related traits in women with type 1 diabetes, hyperandrogenemia was present in 25%. The prevalence of androgen excess traits, particularly hirsutism. So all these things are very frequently seen. Sometimes we anticipate that this is nothing but this is part of young type 2 diabetes. No, type 1 can also have. Difference in women with type 1 diabetes depending on the presence or absence of polycystic ovarian disease. Exogenous systemic hyperinsulinemia may be involved in the pathogenesis of type 1 diabetes and PCOS. Glycemic control and daily insulin doses were similar in patients with type 1 diabetes presenting with or without PCOS. Mean HbA1c levels since diagnosis of type 1 diabetes in patients, this is again important. Mean HbA1c level continuously over the years. Women under intensive insulin treatment had a significant higher prevalence of polycystic ovarian mass or polycystic ovarian disease syndrome compared with those under conventional 2-dose insulin. So more strict control, chances are that you'll have a more chances of polycystic ovarian. My thoughts are in young ladies, even with normal, sometimes they present with irregular cycles, or when they grow up, there is an evolution and all these things. So if we go for a nicer control, sometimes this also helps. So PCOS and related hyperandrogenic traits appear to be among the most common comorbidities. PCOS may contribute to subfertility of these women, and a screening of PCOS and androgen excess should be included in current guidelines for management of type 1 diabetes. So this is another important, a very fast running of erectile dysfunction. The epidemiological studies suggest that both type 1 and type 2 diabetes are associated with increased risk of erectile dysfunction as compared to general population. And this is a paper. Earlier, we used to think only with type 2. Now the picture is different. This was a study on type 1 diabetes. Metro study was conducted to assess prevalence and correlation of erectile dysfunction in young men with type 1 diabetes and evaluate whether CSSI therapy is associated with better sexual function as compared to MDI. The prevalence was 37%. in men and compared to 6% in control. So huge. And if you look, this is overall prevalence and MDI versus CSI. So maybe if as diabetes progresses, something happens. What happens? We need to understand. To conclude, the prevalence of erectile dysfunction was consistently higher in the whole population of diabetic men as compared with age-matched control subjects. Erectile dysfunction prevalence rates were not different in diabetic men treated either with MDI or CSII. So this is another important, very strong control. Sometimes, I mean, there is a known fact that with good control, the autonomic neuropathy reverses, but this is seen in both the categories. The overall prevalence, as I told you, was 37%, huge. The prevalence of rate of ED as well as this is IIEF international scoring system were similar in diabetic men treated with MDI or CSII. In an ancillary study of DCCT, the prevalence of ED was significantly lower in intensive versus conventional. So here we are observing a little different thing. Obesity, poor glycemic control, smoking, psychological disorders are well-known risk factors for ED in men suffering from diabetes. In the present study, men with ED showed lower weight body mass index as compared to men with or without erectile dysfunction, presumably as a result of reduced insulin doses. And last slide, uh, there is a word known as autoimmune polyendocrine syndrome, type 1 APS1. So this is a rare thing, less than 500 cases. But if you see type 1 diabetes, mucocutaneous candidiasis, Addison disease, hypoparathyroidism, and hepatitis. So any one of, if you are seeing, look for remaining things. And it is the autosomal recessive syndrome. So this is another important thing. These syndromes are seen, they are within our community, but we miss them. And finally, this is a beautiful picture greeting from SPAD, Society for Prevention and Awareness of Diabetes from city. We have been doing a lot of work as my friend Dr. Sujata, Archana, and Dr. Chingan, Dr. Ramchandani. We had a meeting in 2015 RSSDI Lucknow. So he's a Larry Hurst, BD Chief, Dr. Aish Bhatia from SGPGI, Sunil Gupta, Archana Sarda, Archana Didi, Dr. Deepak, Dr. Gangli, friend of mine, and Madhukar Katia from Lucknow. So with this, thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you so much.